Once upon a time, the village idiot canceled a few monthly expenses, started putting that toward a little bit of gold every month. A village idiot might be a little bit harsh, but a basic fellow, really handsome, fun to be around, but basic. And over the course of 8.5 years, that wasted expense turned into a medium-sized stack of gold that's worth more every time he tells his story. And this time around, it's worth more than $100,000, so that'd be 145% gain on my principal. I mean, his principal. So gold is up 43% year to date in 2025. Silver, it's up 55%. Housing is up 0%. Maybe you weren't expecting that, but we need some context on asset classes here. Bitcoin, it's up 17% year to date. ETH is up 38%. S&P 500, 12%. So that's the context, and what should immediately stand out here is that the metals are outperforming everything else. So that makes the plan that I'm going to cover here a little bit more compelling. Now, normally you might say the point of holding gold is to offset possible losses in other categories, but those other categories aren't losing. Gold is still outperforming, and so is silver finally, but the numbers are a little bit more impressive, a little bit more fun right now. Now, this plan that I'm covering, it was never meant to be super exciting. It was meant to be practical. I kicked it off when metals weren't outperforming other assets, when things weren't so exciting. It wasn't meant to be a get-rich plan. And maybe that's why the result is so impressive. Now, before we take that further, quick shout out to channel sponsor Summit Metals. If you're looking to buy gold or silver, they have you covered. And hey, if you're looking to sell, they have you covered there too. They'll take care of you on both sides of the sale. SummitMetals.com. Okay, back to the plan. Well, I don't think there's any real debate left about whether it makes sense to hold metals, but in case there is, I'm going to show the performance of a simple plan, buying gold consistently and incrementally over time. Now, this is not a finite plan. It's not something you stop when you hit a certain number, but I ran it for 8.5 years. And you're going to see that that same time frame leads to a very specific big number when we map it out differently. So we're going to stick to that. So let's get our specifics in here. We're talking about a quarter ounce of gold every month. You've heard me explain this before. I'm going to give some context as we go and as I'm shuffling these coins, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a quarter ounce every month. Now, before I start throwing out numbers, complicating things, I'm just going to say that 1/4 ounce a month was not random. It was the amount that I could comfortably afford and the cadence that kept me interesting at the time. Now, that's very important. We're going to come back to that. Now, spoiler alert, this plan performed for me extremely well, but that's actually the least interesting part, the least interesting way to explain it. And I'm going to give that as background, but what I really want to show you is how the plan works in 3 other scenarios. First, I'm going to show how it would have looked if we had just completed those 8.5 years of buying today. And then second, how that same plan would look if we started it today. And you're going to see the same plan would now be a lot more expensive. Buying a 1/4 ounce a month today to get to that 26 ounces of gold in 8.5 years is different than it was starting back in 2017 or the end of 2013. We can't replicate that plan again, right? Well, for the third scenario, I'm actually going to show you that it's possible to pull off the same plan again. It just requires a simple tweak. Okay, so putting the actual numbers to this first scenario, if you've been buying 1/4 ounce of gold every month and you just hit the 26 ounce mark, it would have cost $52,035 to accumulate that 26 ounces of gold. You would have started in 2017 and that would have ran for 104 months. Now today, with gold at $3,665 an ounce-ish, that stack is worth about $97,900. So 88% gain. And for me personally, I started this same plan at the end of 2013. So my cost to get that 26 ounces was about $40,000. So at today's price, that would be 145% gain. Now, I don't want to complicate this by adding a bunch of new numbers, but that was setting aside $40,000 and it grew to 100. So the plan starts spending less than $400 a month and the stack grows to right around $100,000 in value. Now do Bitcoin. That is the comment that always seems to show up from the kids with only a few years of investing experience. And yeah, I do Bitcoin, but it isn't the same as gold. Bitcoin isn't savings to me because it's just terribly volatile. And really, by the time that I personally felt confident dollar cost averaging any kind of crypto, a lot of that price discovery was already behind us. I started in 2020. I'm not smart enough to talk about it, but it's done well most of those years since then. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The point of this plan is not to prevent you from doing other things. If you're into Bitcoin, keep at it. With the 17% gain year to date, it's doing pretty well. You just add a few more percentage points, and you can say it's done half what gold has. So the question is, if you didn't start back in 2017 or 2013, is it too late now? And the answer, of course, is no, because the same system works. A quarter ounce a month, 3 ounces a year, or really any other amount that fits your plan still stacks up over time. The consistency of saving is what matters. Time is doing the work. Now, today's price of $3,780 an ounce, price actually went up in the last few minutes, it might seem like a completely different plan. A quarter ounce of gold will now cost about $1,000 a month. So let's look past whether or not we can afford that for a minute and take a look at that second scenario that I mentioned, running the numbers on what would happen if we started today and gold followed that same 180% gain that we saw over the past 8.5 years. That would turn that 26 ounces into about $273,000 at the end of that time frame. So it's more expensive, it's also more rewarding. The cost to accumulate beginning today would be about $144,000 compared to $52,000 from that first scenario, $40,000 from my personal case. So it costs more, but you end up with more as well. $273,000 rather than $100,000. Same habit, different speed. So that brings us up to the third scenario. Could you find a plan where your monthly purchases start around $400 a month and get to $100,000 in 8.5 years? It's something that can never be repeated, right? Well, wrong. If you're looking for $100,000 in gold savings, if that's your target, you could start with 1/10 of an ounce of gold a month rather than a quarter. You'd be stacking a little bit more than this 1 ounce of gold a year. That would be 10.4 ounces over the same amount of time that we've been talking about, 8.5 years. Now, using those same gains in price again, that 180% gain that we saw over the prior 104 months, ran those numbers on what it costs to accumulate and what it would be worth at the end. Well, we would spend $58,000 to stack those 10.4 ounces, and the final haul would be worth just over $109,000. Okay, we need to add some practical thinking here. We have to look at two things. The first is that I'm applying a price curve from 2017 to 2025, and the price of gold was relatively low back in 2017. So it would be really hard to just assume that the same 180% gain can be plugged into today's price cycle. Certainly, no guarantees we'll see similar performance. Unfortunately, we can't see the future. This is just an illustration of how the plan has worked using the immediately preceding numbers. Now, the second is that the price of gold has drastically outperformed inflation over this period of time. Now, this might even be the most important part of this message. A quarter ounce of gold today is not comparably priced to 2017. Back then, the monthly cost was less than $375. Adjust that for inflation, $375 from 2017 would be comparable to $500 today. Still less than half the current price of the same coin. So if you started out today with 1/10 ounce purchases instead of 1/4, it would actually line up very closely to that plan from 8.5 years ago. So use that correlation however you want, but at least a few of us will walk away thinking the quarter ounce plan has now become a 10th ounce plan. And this is important because a big reason the plan worked for me is that the monthly purchases weren't restrictive. I could have put aside $370 without giving up anything important. That's what I did. But an extra $1,000 a month, well, that wouldn't have been realistic for me at the time. I never would have done it. It would have been too hard to lock in that habit. What would have happened? Well, I would have spent that money on other things, and unfortunately, I don't think it would have been the right things. I had carved out that $400 or so out of wasted monthly expense. The trick to turning that into savings was that the gold was shiny and interesting. Punch the endorphin button every time it showed up. I've talked a lot about the value appreciation in this video, but it was really the endorphin hit that made this whole thing work for me because saving is normally pretty boring. Now, what's not boring is that more than a decade after kicking off my plan to set aside $400 a month for gold, we're at the same starting point if we just swapped the fraction, swapped it from 1/4 to 1/10 ounce of gold. And if the numbers held, that plan would actually play out very similarly with 1/10 of an ounce, slightly ahead of the 1/4 ounce plan. History doesn't repeat, but maybe it rhymes. I kicked off my plan in late 2013 with a $375 gold purchase. Turned $40,000 of savings over 8.5 years into $100,000 in value. But more important than what I spent was where that capital came from. That was just money I was wasting. Now, I switched my plan in 2021, so that was actual performance. 145% gain on the capital, 215% gain in gold price. But that isn't even the performance curve that I used for these scenarios in this video. I used the lesser 180% gain that we would have seen if the 8.5 years ended today. That would give us 90% gain on principal. But look, infinite gain if what we're looking at was otherwise wasted. So $100,000 instead of nights on the town, cable TV, those things don't appreciate. So if you're looking at all this today wondering if it still makes sense, well, future isn't very clear. But the important parts are, don't go outside your comfort zone, don't let it prevent you from doing other things, and just keep at it. I just showed how it could all still work as long as you let time back it up. And let's call it good there. Let's get some opinions here on buying strategy. I know a lot of people fell off their consistent purchases, gold doubling over the past 5 years. Let us know if that has broken your habits, if it's changed them, or if you're trying to figure that out right now. Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.